Yesterday, we came together, minorities and majorities, to make a decision about the future of Alaska. I've told many of the people who've written me that the decisions that we're making today, and they're not done today, but the decisions that we're making today are decisions that chart a course for Alaska, one way or the other. I couldn't be prouder, as the member from Midtown mentioned yesterday, couldn't be prouder to be with a better group of people who understand that this is that seminal moment. These 2 days have been 2 of the hardest of my life, because I know that the things we're doing will potentially break this place, this state that I grew up in, the state I love. 36 years ago, I first worked in this building, and I worked for the member from Midtown's father. And he was the caucus chair of a bipartisan coalition at that time. We were flooded with oil wealth. We produced, in dollars of that time, which would be worth significantly more today, over a $6 billion budget. We built, as a state, we were building harbors on islands that no one lived on. My boss fought against those kinds of things at the time within a caucus. He fought for an infant learning program, which back then we received POMs, and they would send it POM after POM, save the infant learning program. $6 billion, and we couldn't save the infant learning program. He fought for that. Those moments shaped what I do in this building. I've often talked about my former boss, the late Representative Max Gruenberg. He did the same. As a majority leader for 2 years, I worked for him. He worked across the aisle. He built compromise. When the minority members in the legislature at that time weren't getting their bills, he reached out to them. He dispatched us to do it. I've said this before on the floor of the Senate. That level of comity drives why I do this job. In answering those letters over the last few hours, actually, I was up till about 3 a.m. last night answering letters, and I was up at 6 a.m. this morning doing the same. I'm sure many of you were as well. Madam President, I got a letter from a person who had asked me to support override. We've all gotten 3,000 letters. I wrote back to that person with a fairly generic letter, and he wrote back a flaming response saying this is all just politics. And I wrote back a very personal letter saying it's not politics. Madam President, permission to read.
Permission granted.
I wrote these words to him. I spent most of this session trying to develop a strong relationship with the President of the Senate, with whom I have often clashed politically in the past. We built that relationship. Both of us understood that over time we would likely face 45 votes as a threshold. We put aside our differences to focus on that bigger picture. I have spoken to the Speaker about the same thing. I've encouraged him to reach out as well, just as the President reached out to my minority, for him to reach out to his, and he has. While that will require time, and while we may not succeed today, I can see no other path forward. The path forward, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, is for us to work together. I share my colleague from Midtown's view of what is important and essential in this budget. I believe that we have a collective vision that Alaskans share that includes that budget that was only ever opposed by 15 members of this body, this collective body. 15 members opposed it. That's all. I believe we can get there, but I think that the answer to how we get there is how we talk to each other. I think the answer to how we get there, Madam President, is how we're able to deal with each other, not just as members of one political party or another, but how we talk to each other as human beings. There's not a person in this building that can't love this place or they wouldn't be here. I responded to that gentleman and I said, I love this place and I don't want to lose it. His next response to me was an honorable and decent letter back saying, I love this place too and I don't want to leave. He said, please get together and work and talk with others. And I paraphrase when I say that, but that's what he said. That message came to me less than 2 hours ago, Madam President. I didn't know what I might say here, but I do want to say this. The courage in the room yesterday, the spontaneity of what we had to say as a group, spoke to me as an Alaskan. I can only hope that it reached into the hearts of my colleagues up north. And I want to acknowledge my friend from Wasilla who's here with us today, who was not here before. I want to believe that collectively we will make a budget that Alaskans will be proud of. To me, it's not about a check. It's about a future. I meant to say yesterday, 35 times on this floor we said the word unprecedented. 35 times. Next year, we won't get to say it once because it's not unprecedented anymore. But it can't become the norm. If it becomes the norm, we have lost. If it becomes the norm that the legislature will deliberate and do its work, and then that work is tossed aside, we will have lost. So I'm appealing to the governor directly, Madam President, to not do that. Honor the three branches of government. Work with the three branches of government. And I'm asking my colleagues that are up north to join us. Even if they support budget cutting and that's what they want to do, we did some of that, let's do some more if we have to. But let us do it collectively, not by planting a flag in the sand that you can't unplant. So, Madam President, will we succeed? Will we make it? We're not going to make it today. Yeah, we're not going to probably make it in the next week and a half. But we have to make it. Alaskans are counting on us to do the right thing. If we don't act collectively, if we don't get to the table together, if we don't resolve these issues, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, we will be taking a path that will be very, very difficult to get off of. We will be going in a direction that is not going to offer opportunity. I said those words yesterday and I mean them again. I'll repeat them. We cannot have an uninformed Alaska. We cannot have an uneducated Alaska. We cannot have an unsafe Alaska. And we cannot have an Alaska that has no opportunity. So I join with my other three colleagues that you've heard today and say, let's do this together. I appeal to my colleagues to come together and do that. I appeal to the governor to release them so that they can join us and be a party to building a better Alaska. That's what we need to do, Madam President and Mr. Speaker. With that, I close by saying, I don't want to lose my Alaska. I don't want to lose my home. I don't want to live in a place that makes me wonder why we would sell out so much opportunity for so little. It doesn't make sense to me. I doubt it makes sense to any of you. So with that, please, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues up north, Governor, come together.